Continuing the Monday edition, Drew and KB from the Iron Jock Studio. One of the great things about being in New Orleans for a week was that we got to hang out with our buddy Aaron Nagler of Cheesehead TV on the regular. Aaron Nagler, like all of our Packers go-to guys, are presented on our program by Rogers Behavioral Health, Hildebrand Law, The Great Taste of Miller Lite, and Orthopedic Associates of Wisconsin. There is a difference. Good afternoon, Nags.
Good afternoon, Drew, KB, Hunter. How you guys doing?
Well, you've just been presented a Drew and KB Monday game ball for your prediction because you emphasized that the Eagles were going to win, and it was going to be because of the play on both lines, particularly the defensive line. You couldn't have been more spot on, my friend.
I mean, I guess, the broken clock right twice a day strikes again.
Nagler's never right except for Super Bowl 58.
Except for when he's right, which
time.
Is always the exception that proves the rule. No, I mean, I thought that was the key to this game going in, and that certainly seemed to play out throughout the evening.
I didn't think it. I thought it was going to be line play, but as you recall our discussion, I thought it was going to be the offensive line that was devastating, and they really weren't.
Is it as simple to say, Nags, that they just Spagnuolo sold out and Barkley's not beating us? You got to beat us through the air?
There was some of that. It was striking, right? How, I mean, I'm not going to say little he did, but Barkley really wasn't a major factor, right? When you look at that game, and I did think they'd find a little more success, and they did find, a bust, kind of a run here or there, et cetera, as the evening went on. But yeah, I mean, that was almost secondary to the fact that they won it up front on defense, pure and simple. They absolutely dominated that game from the jump, and it wasn't like, I don't think the Chiefs had much of a shot even right out of the gate. Like, I knew it would be tough going early on, but just the way they absolutely could not do anything. Mahomes couldn't breathe back there. It was all due to the kind of waves that they were able to send after him. And they didn't blitz, not one time.
That amount of
all
devastation.
4-man rushes.
Exactly.
And most of the damage was done by two dudes. Down in and down out.
They said the only time that it could be almost considered a blitz is when they sent Zach Bond, but they dropped a lineman back in coverage.
So it was still four.
It was still like only four guys going.
Exactly.
And it was utter devastation to that offense.
It really was. And what was fascinating to me is, like, I'm sure the Kansas City spent the last 2 weeks drawing up plans. They've spent the entire season really kind of playing the short game, right? They've utilized kind of screens and things like getting the ball out in space as an extension of the run game, because I think they had a pretty good idea they weren't going to be able to run the ball, and that certainly played out. But it didn't matter what they just had no answer up front. And Nolan Smith, who'd been having a kind of an outstanding postseason, he wasn't, I'm not going to say a non-factor, but he wasn't the wrecking ball that Josh Sweat was, who had been somewhat quiet this postseason. He had an MVP-like performance. And
pretty good timing.
I just don't think, yeah, exactly, ready to hit free agency. I just don't think they just couldn't handle them up front in any realistic way, and that kind of doomed them right from the start.
So speaking of MVP, Hurts is fine, and they default to the quarterback. If you had to give it to one defensive player and you couldn't give it to the whole unit, who do you give it to? I mean, other than Hurts?
To Josh Sweat. I probably give it to Sweat. The way he completely dominated up front, they could not block him. It didn't matter what they continuously switched things up as far as sliding protection, pinching in, trying to do everything they could to give Mahomes. They rolled Mahomes out on the play where he throws the pick six. Like, they're trying to move the pocket there, right?
I thought
they're doing everything they can to try and help the quarterback, and none of it helped.
I think if they were going to give it to a defensive player, they probably would have given it to Cooper DeJean simply because that pick six was higher profile.
Well, of course, because it's the splash play, but it only happens because of the play up front, which I know but yes, you're right, because it is a big splash play.
All right, let's hypothetical. Neither one of them is going to happen, but if you could have one or the other, Josh Sweat or Myles Garrett, who helps the Packers more in 2025?
Well, Myles Garrett, but I think Josh Sweat is way more realistic. It's funny because I've been talking about this afternoon on Twitter with some followers and other people who think I'm crazy, but it is kind of funny. We're definitely in that era now where we've got that next month or so where people are going to be talking about, a Devontae Adams reunion or trading for Myles Garrett. And, they're just going to like sign somebody like Azeez Ojulari from the Giants and then draft a receiver in the second round and call it a day. That's the Packer way, right?
We filled the holes.
But let's start piecing together our, Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln. Lincoln had a, okay. No, seriously, let's start.
All right.
Let's start piecing that together.
Okay.
So the Packers are looking for an edge rusher.
Yes, sir.
As a free agent. And they go get a guy from the Eagles. Granted, not as not as celebrated as the other guy, but that started a Super Bowl run for Brett Favre, who is in his what? Third year as a starting
I see where you're
quarterback.
going now. I see where you're
Kennedy had
going.
a secretary
Line
named
it up,
Lincoln.
baby.
All they need is a defensive
All right.
end to come from the Eagles, and it's
No
on.
one's mistaken Josh Sweat for Reggie White, but
I know.
I like where your head's at. I like where it lines up
He's
there.
making it. We're
Yeah.
talking to Aaron Nagler, cheeseheadtv.com. Okay, so we view everything through the Packers prism as always. Again, Hurts was good throwing the ball.
He was. He had
But he was
one
good.
really bad play, the interception down there in the red zone. That was a horrific throw. But outside of that, I thought he played a pretty damn good game.
But with his feet, 11 carries for 72 yards and the tush push tutty. Negs, 72 yards rushing from a quarterback in the Super Bowl. I know Jordan Love was watching. Jordan Love rushed for 83 yards in the entire season.
Yeah, and Jordan referenced that in one of the interviews he did down on Radio Row this week,
Yep.
where he talked about clearly the knee not being 100%, really not able to move as much as he wanted to, and he name checked that. I mean, he unprompted said, I want to use my legs more next season. And I think
because
you saw how effective he was his first year as a starter, just not even as designed run most of the time, but able to get outside the pocket and make things happen, even to the point where he could run the ball and pick up first downs that way. Just didn't ever seem to be on offer this year. And I think that's a direct kind of response to the knee. But like I said, like he name checked it. So I think that's, eye-opening, because this is my thing I keep coming back to, because people point at the issues that Jordan had down the stretch, which are very real as far as missing receivers, some of the inaccuracy stuff. Certainly, that's all the types of things he needs to work on, which he is well aware of. No doubt will spend the offseason working on. But man, there is more than one way to win a football game. And if you can utilize his legs and keep defensive coordinators guessing, that's just another kind of, arrow in your quiver, so to speak, that I think is a smart way to go about it.
Okay. Packers against the Eagles in the playoffs was 22-10, right?
Yes, sir.
Packers had 4 turnovers in that game. Can we take any solace in that the Packers gave the Eagles their toughest run in the whole, on the road to the title?
Hang the banner, whatever you want to do. I was joking about it last night, and of course there's no tone on Twitter, so people kind of run with it regardless. But I did somewhat jokingly say, look, they beat the Chiefs last year. They gave the Eagles their toughest kind of out this year. They're clearly the second best team in the NFL. Now that is exaggeration, kind of mostly as a joke, but I do think Packers fans should look at these things and say, okay, I get it was a disappointing end of the season. I get they never got over the hump against the best teams in the league this year. But, man, you cannot look at this team and tell me that they are not headed in the right direction. You just can't.
And that's the thing to me, is you view it through that prism. Yeah, the Packers are not as good as the Eagles. We saw that twice in Sao Paulo, and we saw it again in the playoffs.
100% correct.
The gap isn't that wide.
It's not this chasm that people want to make it out to be.
No.
I couldn't agree more. And that's the thing, because you have something like that last game against the Bears, you lose that game, and Packers fans, it's going to stick in their mind all offseason for good reason, right? But that's not a game that even had that much, literally ended up not meaning anything. They played a bunch of backups as that game went along, even started a few. It's I understand it's frustrating, but you go from 8 to 9 to 11 wins with the youngest team in the league the last 2 years. The program is working. They're heading in the right direction. Obviously, this is a major offseason as far as attempting to take that next step and become a contender.
So to coin a phrase from Philadelphia, trust the process is what you're
Somewhat. Now, I mean, it only took 20 years in Philadelphia. Hopefully it,
that's true.
Takes a little less time in Green
Nags,
Bay.
you check me, because we'll get back to Packers in a second. But is my logic flawed in that I see this Phillies team in the pantheon of the NFL as being like the Giants with Eli, dynasty wreckers? The Giants beat Brady, and these guys they beat
up on Kansas City now.
Now they beat up on Kansas City. They're dynasty wreckers. Are they a dynasty unto themselves? Again, people don't want to say it. They got incredibly lucky. They got Zach Bowen for $3.5 million off the bargain bin, and he's the defensive player of the year, basically.
Right.
And he makes a play in the Super Bowl, helps you win the game.
I mean, it's not dissimilar to what the Packers did when they initially got Devondre Campbell, right? You talk about off the street, late in the process for a song, right? And then he goes on and has an all-pro year. That's smart by your front office. And I think Howie and company in Philadelphia, they're very smart. But we do have to stop letting great players just fall to them or just hand them these guys, because between the Saquon Barkley signing and you're talking about the things they did in the offseason as far as free agency signings and what happened in the draft, man, it doesn't make his job too difficult. That's for sure. So I think they're really talented. They're really good in the front office there. But yeah, the chasm is not that wide when you compare it to where the Packers are.
And to go back to the Giants, you got a quarterback that's not. I mean, they have a coach that's not necessarily beloved in his own market. Maybe his Q rating went up yesterday, and a quarterback who's good enough, but not a spectacular.
It's not a classic, whatever you want to call it, elite passer of the football. But again, there are other ways to win football games.
Hurts. You look at Hurts, and people would say, "I'd rather have Burrow. I'd rather have Josh Allen." Some would say, "I'd rather have Jordan Love." But he won the damn game, right? And he made the other thing that I brought up before is that Hurts played better in the game that they lost 2 years ago than he did yesterday.
Seriously,
he gets no credit for that.
People tend to remember the fumble because it was such a game kind of changer. It was a fulcrum point of that Super Bowl. But outside of that one play, he was phenomenal in that game against the Chiefs. Better than he was last night, I agree.
Yes.
I mean, he made some passes yesterday that were pretty damn good. And then
that first third down where they get the phantom offensive pass interference. I mean, when they just let him play, and that's a huge gain right up. It's a total dime, Like he can do what you need to do to win football games, which he showed last night.
Well, I mean, it was I still think, and it just struck me. I just got this feeling in New Orleans when I was down there that there was a overconfidence in the Chiefs side of things, and all the attention was at, looking at them, and the Eagles just went about their business.
The Eagles definitely had a quiet confidence this whole.
I know it, and
I agree.
It was like Denver over the Packers in the second Super Bowl. It was the same feeling I got.
But Saquon got a lot more juice than Terrell Davis in that run up. I mean,
sure,
that's true, but that's not like Terrell Davis was insanely productive throughout that postseason. I mean, it's not like he was quiet. You know what I mean?
I know, but it was like Saquon was not underhyped. I mean, and he didn't. They won a game. If I showed you that rushing line for Saquon,
that's what I mean,
and said that they win, that they blew him out, you'd be like, "What? How did that happen?"
No, and that was a surprise to me. I did think they'd have a little bit more success in that regard, but I do think Spagnuolo was like, "There is no way we're letting this guy run all over us." And he made him kind of beat not only with his legs but with his arm as well. And Hurts was up to the task.
Well, and kudos. Let's give some kudos to Kellen Moore.
Yes,
for
sir.
coming up with a game plan. Being able to say, they're going to try and stop Saquon. So this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, they ran a lot of mesh, and I think that was really successful as far as Spags loves to play a lot of man coverage. Well, good luck with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, just running like incredible amounts of easy underneath stuff, but there's a lot of traffic because of all the bodies, and you're getting AJ Brown running away from a corner. That's just easy pickings.
Well, the other thing, Nags, too, is if we're giving game balls and kicks to the balls, and one of the game balls, of course, went to the defensive line of Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
But let's not forget the secondary because, Mahomes was under pressure, but there was never anybody open. Ever.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
I mean,
so hard.
ever.
That's the thing against that Fangio defense with that kind of scheme married with the personnel they have. You're just sitting in that too high look, and you got eyes on the quarterback. That's the whole reason DeJean gets his interception, right? Is because you can play with a ton of bodies in coverage. You don't have to commit numbers to pressure. All day. The only tried and true way of getting them or any team like that out of that look is to run the ball. And that's something Kansas City just could not do.
So again, spinning it back to the Packers, Kenny Clark, we've seen him wreck games. He wasn't consistently productive last season.
No, he was not.
But they have some dudes, J.J. Kingsley, Enikbari. We have, Slayton. They have guys.
Wyatt had a good year when he wasn't injured.
Yes, he did. Do they need another player there? Like now, does this change our hierarchy of needs for the Packers?
That doesn't change mine. That's what I've been talking about. Build your lines, man. Build your lines and prosper. Both sides of the ball. You got to win in the trenches. That is where the game is won. That enables you to do everything else. So for me, if we're talking so much about edge rushers this offseason, which I get, right? I understand the Max Crosbys, the Myles Garretts. That's fun stuff and enticing and exciting. But to me, it's probably way more likely that they target someone like Osa Odigizua, the defensive tackle from the Cowboys, who I loved coming out in the draft, and now he's set to be a free agent. He is an interior rusher who really fits what they want to do up front. enabling them to just rush 4 guys and create havoc with just great explosion off the ball, getting across the line of scrimmage. And that you just improve everybody by doing that because the quarterback doesn't have anywhere to step up. He's running for his life like you saw with Mahomes last night.
Because of what we just saw, and we're all victims to recency bias. We're all going to focus on defense. And then there's the wide receiver thing aside. Is Jordan Morgan the most important guy? Is this the most important offseason is to have him be able to slide in? Because if they let Josh Myers go, he's got to play.
Yeah,
he's got to play like a first-round pick.
Here's the thing to remember with Jordan Morgan. He was playing, and he was set to play this year. He was going to be a long-term starter, and then he re-injured his shoulder, which he hurt in the summer, right? I know everyone watches Cooper DeJean last night and gets kind of buyer's remorse or kind of melancholy that the Packers didn't take him, right? But you got to remember, he's playing in a defense that is obviously playing to his strengths, helping him out a lot as a secondary guy because they're getting great pressure with 4. Man, the Packers got a player just as good in Evan Williams way later in the draft, and they have Jordan Morgan, who hopefully does step in and becomes, if not a starting tackle, a starting guard next year. That's what you need. You need to protect your quarterback. You need to be able to run the ball. Jordan Morgan is a part of that. So I get it's frustrating he was hurt, but the process was sound. They got bad luck with injury, but hopefully, yes, he steps in next year and becomes part of an improved offensive line because that's where they have to improve up front on both sides of the ball.
So do you think Nags in the offseason owners meetings are going to finally get rid of the tush push because it's a cheap BS play?
No, I love the play. And I think it's ridiculous. I hate it. I think it's ridiculous that people hate on it, including one Mark Murphy, who yet
it's
again
cheap.
on Packers.com said
it's cheap.
Look at that. What's cheap? What the classic quarterback
it used to be a penalty.
What the classic quarterback sneak isn't cheap? Bart Starr going across the goal line to beat the Cowboys in the Ice Bowl wasn't cheap.
You didn't have 4 guys pushing him from behind.
Who cares? Stop it.
If
it's so cheap, why can't every single team do it?
There used to be a penalty.
No one else can do it. They
do
it. Yeah, but everybody else tries it and they can't do it. So what's the point? Like, how is it cheap? They've perfected it. Figure out how to stop it.
Wayne told us that iconic photo by John Beaver, who was at the Super Bowl and has been at every one.
Yes.
Chuck Mercine had his arms up, not to signal touchdown,
to show that he's not pushing
he wasn't
pushing.
Yes. He wasn't pushing the quarterback. Right. So iconic moments. Nags, anything else from our week in New Orleans? I'm sure you had some fun. I see you got your New Orleans Museum of Art t-shirt.
Oh, went to the art museum on Saturday. It was lovely. I had such a good time. I'm still here actually. I'm going to Port of Call tonight for dinner. Forget that. Can't leave town without a burger from Port of Call. So no, man, New Orleans is great. I love it here. I come back as often as I can. They need more Super Bowls here. 12 years is way too long to go between Super Bowls in New Orleans. That's all.
Needs a good scrubbing.
Just
most major cities probably do after the Super Bowl's been in town.
Yeah, that's probably true. Well, it's going to be a blast, Nags. We will talk to you as the draft approaches because that'll be on us before you know it, really.
I can't wait. Cannot wait. I'll be at the Combine, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you at some point leading up to the draft.
Yes.
The offseason, the grind never stops, baby.
Never does. And again, the takeaway is, okay, the Packers, it wasn't their year, but they're not that far away. I kept thinking that to myself. They're not that far away.
Totally agree.
Yep. Let's get the planets aligned. Thanks for the whole season. Thanks for last week, Nags. We had a blast.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, guys. I'll talk to you probably in a few weeks, but we'll talk soon.
All right, man. Take care. Aaron Nagler. Our go-to guys are always brought